You are listening to the Mom to Mom podcast, hosted by Stephanie Sinclair, founder and owner of How to Mom. This podcast is meant to empower women and bring the community together through storytelling and education. During these episodes, you will hear stories of triumph, heartache, and hope. You will hear time-tested tips and tricks shared by mamas and women. You will hear a variety of birth stories that will resonate with all birthing families, advice from professionals who have dedicated their teachings to pregnancy, birth, and moms. Here, you will find encouragement, support, and community, because we are your community, and we are so happy to have you. Now, on to today's episode. Hello, thanks so much for joining us on today's episode of the Mom to Mom podcast. I am so excited to invite back a guest who has already been on the Mom to Mom podcast sharing a birth story of her twins. And I will, in the show notes, link that episode because I urge you, if you're listening today, to also listen to that podcast episode as well. I think we're going to have some conversations within today's interview that reflect back on that birth story as well. So I think it would be useful for you to listen to that. I am so excited to introduce you guys once again to who I feel is a friend, a fellow twin mom, and a How to Mom client. Thank you so much for coming back, Sarah, to talk about another one of your birth stories today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That's quite the little lineup you gave me.
Oh, well, I would say even more so, just we've really grown into this amazing friendship that this is why I love the work that I get to do. Clearly, we met through your pregnancy with your twins, but life is so beautiful in the sense of I feel like we both maybe needed each other in terms of just knowing another twin mom and all the things that we go through that's unique to our own journey. So I really mean that. I feel such a great connection with you.
Yes, thanks. I do too. It's just worked out so perfectly for us, I think.
Yeah, it sure did. So Sarah has a singleton who happens to be her oldest, and then had twins who I had the absolute privilege and honor of supporting Sarah and her husband through the birth of their twins. And like I said, she already shared that story, and I will link that episode. But what we thought would be really fun is to invite Sarah back to share her birth story of her singleton, which happened to be a very different birth story. I think obviously not only because it was one baby versus two, but there are a lot of differences in the stories. And I think a lot for all of us to take away from her stories. And we'll kind of dig in a little bit deeper in terms of what I mean by that after she shares her story. So I am going to let you take it away if you kind of want to set the tone in terms of when that was, preparing for your first baby, finding out that you were expecting, and kind of how you prepped and prepared for her birth and how it unfolded.
Sure. Yeah, I said after that birth, my previous doula had mentioned writing out your birth story. And we're so glad that we did because it was kind of fun to read over it last night and kind of refresh my memory because it was just over 4 years ago that we became parents. So Morgan was born in February of 2020. And so that's we got very lucky. She ended up being born at 36 and a half weeks. So just very surprised. Early baby, but she was due, her due date was March 12th. Which would have been right when COVID was hitting hard and things were shutting down. And so we, all through that lockdown time, we just were so blessed. And we said it was a blessing that she came early. Someone was, taking care of us ahead of time and knew that we just wanted to hunker down with this brand new baby and, with our little family of 3 through that kind of scary and crazy time.
Uncertain time. And just a question about her making her entrance early into this world. Did you have any signs? Were there any indicators that she could potentially be born early? What about family history, or were you completely shocked?
We were pretty shocked. So my sister was born 7 weeks early, but I feel like that never really was a conversation. You know,
Right.
I'm baby, you know, they're usually on time or late.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't really a conversation. And as far as feeling what I felt, it was all new to me. And so
Right.
appointments were fine. And but it's funny in hindsight, now after having the twins and knowing, you know, I had some preterm labor with them at 27 weeks,
Hmm.
but I had told them like, oh, it just kind of felt like how I felt with Morgan the first time. So I'm like, oh, so maybe it was
Interesting.
having a little action
Yeah.
early with
But
her.
didn't
And
really know what that was.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
So what
yeah,
were
so
your first signs of kind of going into labor with Morgan?
well, my water broke.
Okay.
So we had spent, so it was a Sunday afternoon. We had spent the day with my sister and her husband in Hutchinson, and we just like kind of spent the day, stayed for dinner. She made this awesome chocolate peanut butter pie, which is now known as labor pie in our family.
Not a bad thing to have to consume.
No, it was funny. We were just kind of lighthearted chatting about things. And I remember in the kitchen, they had a bag of potatoes that was like an 8-pound bag of potatoes. And the four of us were passing it around like, this is what a new baby feels like. No way, that's 8 pounds. And we were just kind of laughing about it. And I said, you know, next time you see us, you know, we'll probably have a baby in a few weeks or a month, I guess it would have been. And
Right.
then we got home and kind of were relaxing. And I can remember saying, okay, I'm going to get to bed early. So I've just been tired and I've got another week of work. And I might have been starting early the next morning. I can't remember. And so it was like 9-ish or so. I like brushed my teeth and went to the bathroom. And while I was going to the bathroom, I was like, this is a very long pee that is not feeling quite right. So I was just like, okay, still okay. This is definitely not.
Like, I'm not even pushing.
Yeah, it's just like you sprung a leak. That's totally what it is. There's no effort. It's just kind of doing its thing.
Yeah.
So I got some towels and, you know, told my husband, I think maybe my water broke. I'm not sure. So I like sat on the couch and for a couple minutes and like felt a little bit more. I was like, yep,
Christina.
I definitely think my water broke. And we still laugh about because my husband just tore off down the hallway because his bag was not packed. And I can remember yelling from the couch, just in a calm voice, just saying, I'm going to need you to be a lot calmer than you are right now. He's like, okay, I can. But it was just like, kind of went 60, totally out of the blue.
Like all that adrenaline just started pumping through his body.
Yeah. Yep. His brain, well, you know, was 10 steps ahead and we need to kind of come back to where we are.
Yeah.
So we reached out to our doula and said, you know, kind of explained what we had noticed. And she's like, you know, it sounds like water breaking. You know, option is to just labor at home for a little while, call, check in with your provider, see what the plan is. We were planning for a hospital birth. And so we called the triage number and they said, if you know, it does sound like a water's broken, we recommend that you come in. You know, I think it was up to us, but first time parents, no clue what we're doing. We just felt better going in and getting checked.
All right, you guys, we are going to take a brief break from today's episode so I can tell you all about one of my favorite companies, Kindred Bravely. They design and sell the best pregnancy and postpartum bras, underwear, sleep, and loungewear. They also have one of my favorite products. It's called the 4th Trimester Panty. This product is just wonderful because it supplies some security for your postpartum belly, and I really needed that when I was postpartum. But it also is designed and comes with some cooling pads. You can either put them in the freezer to add a little cool touch, or you can put them in the microwave to add some heat, whether you're recovering from a surgical or a vaginal birth. I literally wish I would have had this in my postpartum days, especially when I was recovering from both a vaginal and a surgical birth with my twins. one of my favorite products from them. But please feel free to go to their website, check out all of the amazing products that they offer. You can get to their site by following howtomom.com/links. Follow the Kindred Bravely link. And then at the end of shopping, you can add the promo code HowToMom15 to receive 15% off today. All right, now back to today's episode. Yeah, pretty standard too from hospitals as well. Yeah.
It was probably about 10 that we left for the hospital, and we got into our vehicle and the song Push by Matchbox 20 was on, and we just like paused and looked at each other and was like, I think this might be it.
Oh my gosh, the oxytocin started flowing.
Totally. And about 20 minutes to the hospital, and then I started feeling a few contractions on the way there. You know, you always worry all through a pregnancy, like, am I going to know when they're real?
Right.
And I think you do, or I did. It just felt different.
For sure. I think a lot of people, it's like, it's hard to tell someone that, and it's hard to imagine. But yeah, and it's kind of like, you know, when you have multiple kids too, it's like you almost forget what those contractions feel like. And then when you feel them again, you're like, yep, this is it. It's a really weird thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So we got into the hospital about 11 and did triage, confirmed that, yep, my water broke. And the nurse said, you guys are going to have a baby tonight. And we just kind of, again, paused, looked at each other, and just kind of a surreal moment. All the things are surreal.
Yeah, just trying to process the news and like catch up with what your body's doing. Like your mind almost has to catch up. And just for those who are listening who may not know, usually what they do in a hospital setting, if you go in and you have symptoms of your water releasing, they will do a vaginal swab with basically just like a cotton swab. And they put it under a microscope, and that will confirm whether or not that's amniotic fluid present or not. And that's usually how they test. And then if that is positive, that's like an automatic admissions into the hospital.
Yep. Yep. So we got admitted about midnight or so. And our doula, you know, said, let me know when I need to come in. She was going to try to sleep a little bit. And we were like, no hurry. We're going to be here forever. There's whatever. And so we're just kind of hanging out in the room. And my husband remembers we get into this room and there's TV, and he's like, oh, we're going to be here forever. We have friends who watched several football games on a Sunday there first. And the TV was broken. And he's like, what are we going to do? Like, same way. And the nurse is like, oh, we don't have our maintenance, you know, a Sunday overnight.
Right.
But we'll, you know, in the morning, if you guys are still in here. And we're like, oh, okay, that's fine. Spoiler alert, we did not need the TV because Morgan had other plans that we didn't have time to kill.
Wow.
Yeah, so kind of from midnight till about 1:30 or so, had some contractions that were kind of amping up slowly, and we kind of used some nitrous here and there.
Okay.
And then, yeah, and I think it was about 1:30 or 2 where all of a sudden the contractions just hit, like, fast and heavy, like grabbing the side rail. And I remember saying, this is like what it looks like in the movies. You need to call our doula. And Bob was like, okay, I can do that. And so she was, you know, getting ready as quick as she could. And I hadn't had a cervical check yet. It was just like quick and holding on for, and I'm pleading for an epidural. And our nurse, who was awesome, we had her the whole time. She was like, you're rocking this. Like, I don't, you know, we can get it in here. You're going to have to sit up and sit still. And I was like, I can't do that right now. And they're like, you're so great. And so I ended up being checked, and I was between an 8 and a 9.
Incredible. So when they did the swab, they did not check your cervix, or they didn't tell you?
I don't believe that they did.
That is amazing. So the first data, the first set of information between an 8 and a 9. Yeah. That is incredible. Like, first time mom, water breaks at 9 p.m. by 1 in the morning.
She was in a hurry to get here, I guess.
She was. She was excited to meet you guys. Okay, so then does your doula make it before the birth? I can't remember. Yeah. Okay.
Yep, so she got there about 2, a little bit after 2. Okay. And we just kind of doing all the positions, trying all the things. We ended up not doing an epidural because they said by the time you got here and kicked in, it should probably. And I was not in the headspace to know what I needed anymore. So I was just
in transition.
Okay, hang on for dear life. So yeah, so we tried, lots of positions. And my husband's so sweet. He still thinks his big job was just to have the fan.
Yes.
And then, was watching the contraction monitor, whatever the name for that is. And after the fact, like weeks later, months later, I was like, that really was probably the most helpful early on when you would tell me like, okay, here comes another contraction. It's almost done. And I was like, that was so helpful. And he said, honestly, I had no idea what I was looking at. I just thought that it couldn't last super long from what I remember. And so he's like, it kind of just looked like a fish finder.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of went with it. I was like, well, you did a great job because it was very helpful.
Well, so and too, just like hearing Bobby's voice, knowing he's right there, whether or not the information was accurate, it was just that support of like, hold on, you're doing great. Okay, it's coming down. A break is coming. Like just that spousal support and that consistency is so comforting, especially when you feel like you're a little bit out of control or like it just is so incredible to me that like your body just took to it so well, and it was like your mind had to like really quickly catch up with what was happening. Like you didn't have a lot of time to really think through what do we need to do in this moment. And then I did have a question in terms of when your doula did join, and just because I see this a lot with clients, and it's a really beautiful thing, and it's very encouraging as a birth worker, but just the comfort level of our clients and the body language changes when we enter that space and they hear our voice again and they know that they're surrounded by love, that support is there, and like it's almost just like everything kind of softens. Did you feel that relief of just like, okay, my team is here, or were you just in such transition?
I don't think I would use the word soften for that situation for me, but I think, but to the point of saying like, yes, okay, she's here. The person we had our faith in, like she knows what to do. She's the coach. She's the, has all the ideas. Our familiar person. I think I noticed it or not, but yeah, definitely was like, and I think even more so for Bobby maybe because like I said, my state of mind was already kind of way amped up. I think it was the support for him also. Like, okay, someone's got my back. I'm doing my best, trying to control what I can, but I'm kind of getting out of my comfort zone.
It's unfamiliar territory. He'd never experienced that. That's amazing. That's a huge, huge point to make for our listeners of just the care that a doula brings for the entire family unit.
Yeah, so I pushed for, I think, about 2 hours, kind of from push and Morgan was born at 4:20.
Did you feel that overwhelming urge to push with her? Do you remember that?
So we had tried I did hands and knees for quite a bit, and then just was not doing what it needed to do. And I remember we went to the bathroom and I sat on the toilet, and then it was like, oh yeah, okay, so gravity played its role. And then then felt the urge to push.
Awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's such a good point too, because I think a lot of times, people think, okay, we're fully dilated, like it's time to push. And that's not always necessarily the case, especially if a mom is going unmedicated. There's a lot of benefit to waiting until you feel that overwhelming urge to bear down. And just because we're fully dilated doesn't necessarily mean that's the time that we're going to feel that. And so I think that was really great advice, whether it was your intuition or part of your support team, to say like, let's go sit on the toilet, not only because of gravity, but our pelvis is its most open when we're sitting on the toilet. And that is where essentially our pelvic floor has practiced bearing down in the past. And so it's a really familiar place for our pelvic floor. So that's incredible. What a great use of like your time to be able to say like, let's change something up because what we're doing right now isn't necessarily super effective. Okay, so you get back in bed, and did you notice a big difference then?
I think so.
Yeah.
Although I was sucking a lot of nitrous at this point. Like the
Yeah.
nurse was, okay, Sarah, like breathe some oxygen or else you're gonna have. And so, yeah, so pushed a little bit more, I think. Yeah, and then she was born, and the first thing that I said was, please don't tell well, we didn't know it was a girl. So I guess before, so they pulled her out and flopped her right on my chest, and Bobby was going to announce that it was a girl, and they were like, okay, Dad, go ahead. And his response was, I'm pretty sure I saw, but I'm not 100%. And so they pulled her back up, and he's like, yep, that's what I thought. It's a girl. And
Oh,
you're excited. And I remember saying, like, please don't tell our daughter I was very high the first time I held her, because I was, like I said, especially at that last moment, it was really getting my money out of the nitrous oxide.
well, there's something about it. If you are listening and you've gone unmedicated and you use nitrous oxide, it almost, like, in a good way, I felt like, at least when I experienced it, it was like this healthy dependence. It like really got me through in moments that I was like, I don't know if I can do this. It gave me just that little bit of like, yes, I can, or it put me somewhere else, probably because I felt high within it. But and I actually had it taken away as I went into the OR to have the twins, and they were like, oh, we don't have a hookup in here. And I was like, are you kidding? Like, you cannot take this away from me right now, because it was like this dependence of like, I need that. So I know exactly what you mean. But the great thing is it does leave your system pretty quickly. So even if within the first couple minutes you were a little bit
Yeah, kind of
on cloud nine.
Very crazy situation.
Hey guys, it's Stephanie Sinclair, founder and owner of How To Mom. I'm just interrupting today's episode to make sure you are well aware of all that How To Mom offers. We, of course, are a community and a support group for all moms at all stages of life, but we also offer a large variety of services that I wanted to make sure you are well aware of. We offer birth doula services, both in person or online support. We have birth support groups with different birth packages to choose from. We also provide placenta encapsulation services, lactation services from our lactation counselors. We also offer postpartum services, birth planning assistance, belly casting. We have a registered dietitian, nutritionist. We also offer a variety of photography services from birth, newborn, and family packages. We truly have it all here at How To Mom. So please don't hesitate to reach out today to have a free consult and help us find the best way to support you in your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey. Now back to today's episode. So then, yep. Did you and Bobby just look at each other like, oh my gosh, we were just at my sister's for dinner last night, and this morning we're waking up with a baby?
Yeah, because we had texted our close family that night to just say, like, we're going in, and then they didn't really hear anything until she was born, and my poor brother didn't miss that text message. They had already gone to bed or something, and so they just woke up with a phone call from me, like, hey, by the way, you're an uncle. And so, yeah, it was just, and it's just wild, like texting my boss that morning. I had left on Friday, right. And then by the time my maternity leave is up, then COVID started. And so that it just kind of got bumped out, and it was just a wild, like, just kind of disappeared. Yeah. Wild time. Yeah. I got like locked up in the house. Right. How much did Morgan weigh when she was born? She was 5 pounds, 11 ounces.
Okay. And was there any indicators? Did the doctors have anything to say about her being kind of early? Or, I mean, because usually I would say like that's preterm. However, like your contractions started very quickly after your water broke. So like your body was ready. Yeah. I mean, technically she is preterm.
But yeah, her weight was a little low, but she was eating well. I remember her glucose was low, I think. So we did some supplementation right away, and she just had to, and then I think in the hospital she was okay. And then when we brought her home, we ended up having to do the Billy Light for a couple nights.
Okay.
And so just that kind of more preemie type of thing, where just that little body kind of needs to learn how to process things.
Absolutely.
But she stayed with us time. She didn't need any special care time.
Amazing.
So, but I still, like, these women that go 38, 39, 40 plus weeks, I'm like, I never made it to 37 with anybody, which is just wild. I didn't have a 6-pound baby because the twins were just 4 and 5.
Right. But the thing is, like, what is really incredible about, I mean, the story of all of your births, but particularly Morgan, is your body knew and your baby knew, and that was just the perfect day for her to be born. And I think why we felt like, both Sarah and I felt like it was so important to share this story is a couple different reasons. First, birth is unpredictable, right? Like, we can do all of the things, we can prepare, even as doulas, we have a lot of experience, a lot of education, but birth will always keep us on our toes. Like, that's what I love so much about this work, is like, no two births are ever the same. And what's interesting is, like, when we, as first time parents, and we go to these classes and we read these statistics and do our research, it's like, first time moms don't necessarily anticipate that your water is going to release prior to contractions. Don't expect to go early, expect to go late, expect a long labor, as a first time mom. And you were just like, looked all those stats and just like knocked them out. You're like, no stats here for me. Like, I'm going to do my own thing. Morgan's like, I'm going to write my own story. So I think that's really incredible just to hear, like, this does happen. But I also think it was so important, and Sarah and I just briefly talked about this before we started recording. What I thought was so amazing and just really inspiring to me as a twin mom, also as a doula, was Sarah had a pretty straightforward, unmedicated, what I would describe a very beautiful vaginal birth of her first baby. Pretty uncomplicated, I think we can say. Not that it wasn't intense and a lot to kind of wrap your brain around in a short amount of time, but I think a lot of people would look at that and say, okay, you had this vaginal birth with your singleton. And then when obviously you got pregnant with twins, you then had a decision to make in terms of weighing the risks versus benefits of your individual twins, that type of pregnancy and the type of risks that were potentially there for the twins, to decide how are we going to safely birth them. And I just thought it was so important to share the story of, having a singleton and having a pretty straightforward vaginal birth, to then being pregnant with twins and having to make the really courageous decision to say, we are going to go into the OR and we are going to have a surgical birth for our twins so that they walk away safe and healthy, and so that I walk away safe and healthy. And I just think that that's important to show that every birth, even the same mom who's birthing the babies, can look different for many different reasons. And it's not up to anybody else but you and what feels best and safest for your family and your children. And I just always thought it was just really courageous of Sarah to say, and Bobby, we weighed the risks, we weighed the benefits, we talked to our provider, and this is what we feel is the best option and the safest way to deliver and to birth our twins. So I don't know if you want to just talk. We did go into it if you guys listened to this other episode, but I thought we would go into it again here and maybe even a little bit deeper now that you all know what type of birth Sarah had with her first. So just want to hear from you on that.
Yeah, it's just funny because I think our two, I guess technically 3 births, 2 birth stories could not have been more different. Like, every aspect that you look at is different. So yeah, we were saying if we would have had a singleton the second time, Also, only multiple parents use the word singleton, so you can always spot us in a crowd if we're using the word singleton. Um, we likely would have had another vaginal birth because I would have assumed that things would have gone similarly, not complicated. I hope that my body would just, go the course. But with our twins, they were mono-di twins, and so they had their separate sacs, but they shared a placenta. And so it's kind of the medium risk with your different types of twins, because there's a chance that when your first baby delivers, your body may try to deliver the placenta first or the second baby, and that would be really, really dangerous. And so we researched, talked to providers, and decided that, like you said, Stephanie, get everybody where they need to be safest would be just to do that surgical birth. Everything was controlled, and we were very happy with all the stories.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's just a really good point. And this is why I love Sarah. This is why I think our relationship is so unique and amazing, because we have like these inside twin mom jokes and references of like, I say singleton, like it's a normal part of conversation, but you're so right. Like only, moms of multiples will refer to children as singletons, but it's a way to kind of, keep track. But yeah, I think it's really important. I had no idea the differences, like different types of twins, when I was told I was expecting twins. Like, it's not in my family. I don't know much about twins. I had no idea that there were multiple types. And so that was all news to me. And so that was a whole different set of research that I had to do as somebody who was carrying two babies at once. And what were the risk factors, and why is care a little bit different? And I think Sarah just spoke really well to that, of like, they had to familiarize themselves with the type of twins, the potential risks of having a vaginal delivery, and what felt best and safest for their family. So if you are listening, please go listen to her birth story, because her birth story with the twins, because I think it speaks to not only how two very different births can still feel empowering and can still feel supported, and kind of the different support that doulas can provide through those very different birth journeys. So Sarah, I thank you so much for sharing Morgan's birth story. I love that you wrote out her birth story and then reviewed it last night. It's something that I review like literally on every birthday of my kids, because there are things that you will never forget, but there are things that you can't quite remember. And so it's really nice to be able to review your birth story. So I urge everybody listening as well, even if it's just jotting down some notes or even a timeline, you will always look back on that fondly, of just remembering kind of different moments within your birth story. So Sarah, I thank you for being so vulnerable and open with our audience and sharing your stories, because I'm a big believer that somebody listening will be able to relate and connect, and that will make them feel confident in their decisions or excited for what's to come, because they heard a story that is similar or relates to their journey. So thank you. And do you want to leave our listeners with any last tidbit, advice, funny joke, anything?
Oh, gosh.
I know I'm really putting you on the spot.
Well, not really advice, but another thing from Morgan's birth. So we didn't know if it was a girl leading into it. And so we asked our nephew, who I think was in first grade at the time, what he thought we should name our baby. And he said Zoid, as in a trapezoid, because they must have been shapes. And so we called Morgan Baby Zoid all through our pregnancy. And so like the dry erase board in our room said, "Welcome Baby Zoid." And so every new person that came into our room, I was like, the baby is not really going to be named Zoid. And of course, everyone was like, oh, there's new names, whatever. And I was like, no, it really won't be Zoid. So those of you who are thinking of fun names for your child, there's an option for you.
There's an option. And I'm sure your nephew will always love to hear that story and like how special he will feel.
He named her first.
That is so sweet. Well, thank you again for sharing. Thank you all for listening today, and we will catch you on the next episode. All right, you guys, that is it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed. If so, please subscribe to our podcast, comment, share, give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen, and we will see you next time.